Recently, I discovered this free bass plugin, ModoBass 2. It's through IK Multimedia, and it says it's paid, but the free version actually has a decent amount to offer. You can change some of these settings. Obviously, the 60s P bass is the only thing you have unlocked, but then you can slide bridge pickup or neck pickup depending on where you want it. For now, I'll just leave this kind of default setting. Playstyle you can use out of these three settings. It'll kind of let you play with. You can change the muting percentage, um, downstroke, stuff like that. String, if you're using any kind of down tune, tuning, I would just set this to 6 so you have the most versatility. It's got a bunch of different stuff you can change, but I figured this was probably a really good option for people who, you don't necessarily want to spend the money on getting a bass, or, if you're just a guitarist and you're kind of like, well, I don't really want to play bass and just would rather do the MIDI thing. You can most certainly do that. So to give you an example of kind of what I've got going here. And so what I've done is I have ModoBass 2. I've got a distortion on it, and I'll show you what that sounds like without it real quick. I've got it pitch shifted down because that's one of the downsides. I think it stops at like drop G tuning or something, but we needed to go an octave lower just because this is how it sounds in in its stock formation. And then on the lower section, not quite where we want it. So if you pitch shift it just down an octave. And I'll show you what I mean with the guitars if you keep that in where it is normally. And this is in drop A, so it sounds a little bit too high pitched. Whereas if we have it down an octave, here we go. And then I have an instance of OTT on it just to kind of give it a little bit more punch. And I took out some of the mids because it sounded like it was too much string noise, I think. I'll try and show you that. Versus it on. And then for EQ, I've just rolled off at 60 Hertz and then around 7K just to get rid of that kind of harsh top end. I wouldn't even call it harsh, but and that's kind of just to give you an example of, like I said, if you don't want to buy a bass or you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a MIDI bass, you can just load that up. And then in case anybody's wondering for the guitar signal on this, I have an Ignite Amps Emissary here. Just played with the settings a little bit, rolled off the high mids. And then the NAD IR, just the stock, like when you first load it up, it's going to be this option right here, the 441 center. And I have that on both guitars. And then drums are going to be an instance of Crim drums. I've really been liking these for like throwing together as a quick mix. You can't adjust the mixer, being that it's the free version, but that just kind of helps you throw it in there and kind of get your structure straight. So if we go ahead and just swap that out, we can see how it'll sound versus a different drum kit. So here I'm using pretty much my go-to kit, which is the Ugly tone or Ugly tone. And we just always change the kick to the industrial kick because it gives it the most kick, like it gives it the most power behind the kick in my opinion. And then I really like using the grind snare. The snare's great for like gore grind or like brutal death, stuff like that. And I really love using that kick just because it kind of essentially takes over the low end of everything. So if you just hear bass and drums together, so it doesn't sound bad right off the bat. And if we go ahead and mix that a little bit further, we could show you like sidechaining kick to the bass to make things kind of flow a little bit better also. So I'll go ahead and route those out real quick. So I decided to go back and change the industrial kick to something a little bit more death metal just because the industrial kick was hitting way too hard when soloed out. So now we have something just a little bit less intrusive. So now we have the kick sidechain to bass. And obviously the levels are kind of everywhere, but I'm just more or less just trying to show how you can get this bass to sound in or out of a mix pretty much. If you need a way to write bass, if you're putting together a demo, or like I said, you don't want to spend the money to buy a real bass or use something like Loki Bass or anything from Submission Audio, it's just a way you could kind of work around that. And like I said too, for free, it really doesn't sound bad, so it really wouldn't hurt you to just try it out and kind of see how you can fit it into your own thing. And yeah, like I said, I think it handles, I don't even know if it's fully drop G, because if you try, let's see, take the pitch off. If we go ahead and try and send this down, so that's where the low A is going to be. So if we just go ahead and pitch this down an octave, you'll see where it kind of breaks up. And all those like single note hits, I believe, are the key switches. So if we go back into the plugin, it'll show you like down here. These should be like all the key switches for like slides and stuff like that. But you're pretty much only in this range. So that looks like actually a low B is going to be our lowest. And that right there is pretty much the reason why I do the pitch down, so that we're able to get drop A where it should be. But yeah, nothing too crazy on this one. I just wanted to kind of provide an example for being able to use bass if you don't have a bass. And that was pretty much the point of this. And it kind of gets you in the realm of, you know, learning how to program MIDI bass and kind of setting things up. If you only are a guitarist and you don't have a bass and you just kind of want to find a way to punch some stuff in and, you know, kind of experiment with that before you do actually go and jump to make the purchase of like Submission Audio stuff or anything from Solemn Tones that will kind of carry the bass. But yeah, like I said, that's pretty much all I wanted to explain for this one. Just kind of short and sweet. Explain that you can kind of do this for free. So now you'll have a way to work on all your bass stuff for free without having to just have a guitar track and drums.